Pablo, you have yet another report here, and evidently Mark Cuban has now tweeted a 323-word response to your 5-part Ballmer investigation. The tweet begins with, Pablo, you have become a great podcast entertainer, great acting skills, but in terms of getting to the real, not so much. All of what you said is meaningless, in capital letters, if KL2 didn't actually get paid, end quote. We'll get your response to what Mark Cuban says in a second, but why don't you catch people up on your newest reporting here today?
Yeah. Shout out to Zaslow Show 2.0, by the way. I love that show. I loved it when it was 1.0, 2.0, even more excited. We're in Aspiration Investigation 5.0 right now. So why are we doing a 5.0? It's because there's been a lot of talk from Steve Ballmer about how he has been defrauded, victimized, humiliated. And I want to take him at face value. I'm going to lead with this part of the story. There's a lot in here, but the part I'm leading with is because how then is it possible that Steve Ballmer, who was victimized, defrauded, humiliated by Joe Sandberg, and by the way, has said via the Clippers that as of the government investigation, he first began to learn that he was defrauded, victimized, humiliated. The government investigation began January 2024 in the public eye, right? So that was Bloomberg's headline about the Clippers, actually. January 2024, it was undeniable that Steve Ballmer would have known about it. Of course, behind the scenes, people at Aspiration, dozens of them had been interviewed by the federal government as early as spring 2023. But Jan 2024, let's use that. October 2024, one of the board members of Aspiration, Ibrahim Al-Husseini, he is arrested and ultimately pleads guilty to wire fraud. Joe Sandberg has been under investigation. There are articles about this in January, in July, Bloomberg. They've been on it. And so the question I raised in this episode is, if all of that is so, why would Steve Ballmer, his charity, the Ballmer Group, why would he invest $1.875 million in a charity founded and chaired by Joe Sandberg in November 2024? How does one square the circle?
So it's a year and a half after the deal with the Clippers had fallen apart, as federal authorities are closing in. A year and a half later?
Yes, 10 months after Bloomberg reports with the Clippers in the headline that the government is investigating Aspiration and Joe Sandberg, the entity that we've heard Steve Ballmer say over and over again he has been defrauded, victimized, and humiliated by. Why then is he donating $1.875 million into the charity that, by the way, has since taken down on its website that Joe Sandberg is the founder and board chair? That page has disappeared, but thankfully, the Internet Archive gave us a saved version of it, which was up online as of November 2024. Why then would they do that? And so we posed this to the Clippers. The Clippers chief communications officer sent us a response on behalf of the Ballmer Group, which is an interesting thing, that the Clippers PR person is giving us the statements from the charity. This, by the way, after the Clippers PR person, when we asked, generally speaking, hey, we had heard that Steve Ballmer had donated, in Joe Sandberg's charities. Can you comment on that? And their response was, that is germane to the NBA investigation. We will let the NBA investigation take its course. So then we come back with the details, and we get a statement from Ballmer Group in which they say, actually, this is the fourth payment. This is a series of payments that we made to Joe Sandberg's charity, the Golden State Opportunity Foundation, a very small charity that, again, he co-founded, is the person, the entire spitting image of the board chair this entire time. He said, actually, this is the fourth payment, and the first one, upon our reporting with the people who now are still remaining at Golden State Opportunity Foundation, they say that the first one started in January of 2018. And so what we've also, Dan, learned in the course of the reporting is that the relationship between Joe Sandberg and Steve Ballmer actually began in 2017 when that first donation was being discussed, because that donation began, per the charity, on January 1st, 2018, which is almost 4 years before they appeared together for the first time in public via Aspiration. So the relationship, the story, the implausibility, the irrationality deepens.
I'm really confused as to what Mark Cuban is doing. This isn't just a stubborn rich dude refusing to capitulate.
He's holding water for another owner.
He owns still a healthy chunk of the Dallas Mavericks. So what can we glean from this? Like every time he has a rambling statement to you, it's like he either didn't listen to an episode of yours or didn't listen to any of the previous ones. What do you think of the recent pivot to try to parse between intent and whether or not they actually paid? Is this some kind of loophole that the NBA is looking to exploit here to not have egg on their face? Because this seems to be a systematic breakdown of their checks and balances when it comes to these sorts of things.
Let me read the quote again. The tweet begins, Pablo, you have become a great podcast entertainer, great acting skills. But in terms of getting to the real, not so much. All of what you said is meaningless in capital letters if KL2 didn't actually get paid, end quote.
So I guess I haven't exactly poured through Mark's latest tweets. So I'm kind of reacting to this live, admittedly. Something that keeps on happening with him, though, is that he gives us these sort of bullet points, and then we look into the thing and prove why his bullet points were either incorrect or in fact exactly part of the scheme as described, and then he moves on to different bullet points. So that's just generally the cycle, and lots of people around the league have been asking me, Mike, the same question you've been asking me, like, why is he doing this? I want to actually zoom out for a second and phrase this and sort of put it in the context of the larger conversation around the league, because Mark Cuban is so explicitly off in public, seemingly in a way that no one else is willing to be. And every other conversation I have, and we have an anonymous head coach that reached out to me that's in this episode saying it's beyond obvious what happened, right? That this is embarrassing for the league. We have that anonymous head coach. We have a former Clippers official saying that the sun of the Clipper solar system is Kawhi Leonard, the moon is Dennis Robertson. Of course, the Clippers knew about this. This is someone who worked with all of the principals involved. And there are more people I've talked to, by the way, who are actually too afraid to be anonymously quoted because they explicitly have informed me that they fear reprisal from the NBA. So just to give you a sense of like why this is a tense and fraught topic that's very hard to get people to talk about, it's because people are actively concerned that the NBA investigation is not a real investigation. And they're concerned that the NBA would take the time to go after them if they express their honest view of what they suspect, based on my reporting and their own experience, is actually happening here. And then on the other side of the equation is Mark Cuban, who's just endlessly talking. And lots of people are wondering why. And frankly, I am also asking and attempting to answer the same question. And so on that front, I just will have to say for now, my investigation continues.
Okay, can you tell us, though, what you make of the $1.875 million donated to charity to a founder who conned him a year and a half after the Clippers deal ended? Because when Ballmer was talking to Ramona Shelburne, the intimation was that couldn't be so. He kept saying, and that relationship was over, and now you're reporting that a figure suspiciously close to the quarterly payments that Kawhi's supposed to get is being funneled into a charity that is publicly, everyone knows, is underwater.
Yeah, it's very strange. I don't really know how to explain it. I think that's the point of it. Outside of the fact that this is part of a larger relationship that is deeper and more personal and involves the flow of money in ways that they never wanted anybody to connect the dots on. I want to put that timeline in context as well, Dan, because keep in mind, the Clippers have told us previously that they are the ones who terminated the deal with Aspiration in the 2022-2023 season because they couldn't make their payments. Simultaneously, we have proven via court documentation that Aspiration had gone into default, that they couldn't get investors from anywhere other than Steve Ballmer, Dennis Wong, a first-time investor who put in $2 million 9 days before Kawhi Leonard got paid that thing that was delayed, the 1.75, as well as the other people either who were now pled guilty for wire fraud or had already been involved in investments with Aspiration. So the question of like, was this company a mess? Was it obvious? That was obvious in 23, if not end of 22. And so to see this timeline unfurl in which you go from there to all of the public news about the federal government, for Steve Ballmer to make that donation it would need to be the ultimate case of something, Dan, you love talking about, which is separating the art from the artist. He's like, you know what? This charity, this tiny charity that specializes in giving low-income families help with tax preparation for these tax credits that Gavin Newsom has rolled out. This cause is so important to me, Steve Ballmer, personally, that I will overlook the fact that the founder and board chair who first solicited these payments from me and renewed them throughout 4 years, that guy, sorry, 6 years, that guy, I'm going to put aside all of it and continue to give his foundation money. Doesn't really make sense.
Briefly, because I want to get to some more of your reporting here, but him opening the door to the difference between intent and putting something into practice. What do you think that means? Can we look into that? Because what difference does it make? If they tried to circumvent the salary cap, isn't that a problem?
Yeah, that's where I mean, to say the least, right? Like the whole idea that there was an agreement that was intended to be fulfilled with real money negotiated at painstaking lengths that was never disclosed. What does it matter if the full value was paid? I mean, frankly, I don't think it does. But I think to Mark's point, like one of the things that's just weird about this is that the first thing we reported is that KL2 Aspire LLC was listed as a creditor for $7 million in the bankruptcy filing. The deal was for $28 million. So the question of why is only $7 million outstanding would seem to almost be asked and answered by the first document we released, which is that they're owed 7 of the 28. And you could do some math and say, okay, but the company collapsed. And so really it was a 3-year deal for $21 million, in which case, logically speaking, then maybe he got paid 14. Is that what Mark is hanging his hat on? Because we can continue to report out the chain and the timeline. And of course, our investigation is ongoing on that front. But that being this new revelation to me is bizarre. It was kind of the first thing that we reported, that they actually did intend to pay and did pay millions upon millions of dollars in a deal that no one ever announced, let alone completed to its full extent, but literally ever mentioned in public when it was an endorsement deal. That's where I just don't know what leg anyone is standing on at this point.
You have to get a little bit better at using allegedly, no matter how confident it is you are in your reporting. I'm going to read this to you again, though, because I want to hear your best guess theory. Pablo, you have become a great podcast entertainer, great acting skills. But in terms of getting to the real, not so much. All of what you said is meaningless if KL2 didn't actually get paid. What is Mark Cuban doing?
There's a phrase that comes up when people don't really have an argument, and it mostly resembles the we're going to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks approach. And I think the only thing I can imagine is that he is most generously seeing my podcast, as he said, like a true crime story that he cannot help but be fascinated and entranced by. And then on top of that, he is pot committed, is what one NBA executive called it to me. Mark Cuban is pot committed. He is so clearly Team Ballmer in public that even most generously, he just can't back off a thing that is flying in the face of lots of evidence. And so to me, there are more, I would say, disturbing explanations, which I won't speculate on in public, because that would be, to Dan's point about my legal clearances, that would be a little irresponsible. But in the meantime, it just seems it seems like an argument he won't give up. And for that reason, I am frankly ever more interested in why Mark Cuban and what Mark Cuban is saying. And I'm also kind of bored. Like I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like I feel like I'm kind of explaining this step by step, but I guess if you want to come back on the show, we can arrange that.